Fresh.
Okay, good. Yeah, fresh in your brain.
Fresh in the mind, fresh in the, like, okay, so my German is not good. What the fuck did I just watch?
Yeah, you watched the new Rammstein video.
Okay.
You could see. I mean, you don't need no German to see what was going on.
Yeah, right? Okay, so I think a lot of imagery may be lost on me other than, like, the GDR concentration camps. I did not get that woman was meant to be Germania until the
See, I
credits
got that
told
like
me.
the first time that I watched it.
Really?
Because
Okay.
she's like riding in on a... One, she appears in every single epoch of German history.
Right.
And she's like the main focal point.
Mhm.
Also cool that they made it a black woman, because I
Yeah.
imagine just like every like
That's just a trigger in the fucking
yeah.
shots.
Because I mean, if a lot of people don't know this, like Rammstein has been pretty vocally left wing, and a lot of people then when they first learn German, think that they're like even like every German teacher I ever had was always like, oh, they're a horrible band because they're Nazis or whatever. Like people are just that fucking dumb, and they've made themselves like really vocal about then one that I think the lead singer kind of wishes that like the GDR still existed, and that like for example like a lot of people then who like I mean obviously they do use like Nazi and fascist aesthetic all the time. In Germany, kind of problematic obviously because of that whole Hitler thing that happened.
Yeah.
But the sense of that then that there are people who don't get that it is done in kind of like a
in jest and also possibly as a cautionary tale or like
yeah just as like kind of
I
like
never forget.
shock but then also like critique then too about German
Yeah.
society. And there's just a lot of people who then just like this is fucking cool, like they're not like they are right wing this and that, and so they've actually had to like distance themselves with that throughout that. I mean, and this video probably the most obvious of just like their because like they've done festivals that then if like right-wing bands will be on it, they'll drop a festival. And to imagine how big of a band that they are, that's kind of a big deal. So, and they are I would honestly say for like when it comes to like terms of like modern culture and music and stuff like that comes out of this country, although like most Germans are like, oh no, like they're not like they don't play in Germany that much either, so it's kind of like also like really weird, like they're like the biggest export. They were also banned in the United States.
Well, that
for a
happens
while
as well. Like Ireland feels that way probably about you too.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
But like to be fair, like Rammstein's always like been like very much culturally like on the left of that.
Yeah.
I think like even like Zizek has a quote about like them being that way. I don't know, like,
but like it's fair because I know that like my understanding of Rammstein, I didn't know they were like actively left wing though, but like my understanding of Rammstein was they weren't right wing, but there were a lot of bands that sounded very similar to them that were like aggressively.
Yeah. There are bands like that is the thing, that there are a lot of people who rip that like German industrial metal sort of thing and just went with it without the with the fascist aesthetic and without the critique behind it.
Yeah, but it's cool and good. Fucking Christ. Yeah, okay, so that's actually because a lot of the aesthetics, and I'm still fucking very new to German history, and also my German wasn't good, so I feel like I was missing a bit. I think the only line I got was like, I think it's in the chorus where he's like, Deutschland so young and yet so old, or something along those lines. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's Ciarán's level of German. I know, young and alt.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not gonna pull up the lyrics because I'm not a fucking nerd.
Yeah,
but,
go for it.
There's a part where he goes through like there's like all these like where it's like über and like all these like very like negative qualities.
Yeah.
And then how like Germany isn't always like taking itself. Then Germany like wanting to. There's a line that's extremely controversial too because he says Deutschland über allen.
Yeah.
And if you change it to alles, then the phrase is illegal. Technically, it's the third line of the national anthem that you're not allowed to sing. That Nazis love to sing.
Fun fact, actually, in the UK, if you ask British people what's the opening line of the German, they'll say that one. Yeah, they don't know it's been changed.
Yeah, I think Americans think that too if they know the what is it, Deutschland, whatever the fuck it's called.
Yeah,
but so they have all these like negative attributes about how Germany putting itself above everyone has just created like bad situations for everyone.
Yeah,
and then ending with then like Germany over everyone or everything. Bringing it to the sense of that then when Germany finds itself in this position, when Germany becomes nationalistic, it is bad for everyone. So that was one of the main things too with like the lyrics. And there's also another line where he says like Germany, like you'll never have my love or affection or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but for me at least, this is like one of the very first times where that like came forth, of that they were like, as I joked with you earlier, that like Rammstein's now anti-Deutsch.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Also, can I just ask, what are the like 5 eras they were getting at there, or like? Because it's like constantly switching between these like different timepieces. Obvious one there's like a World War II concentration camp.
Yeah, that's the one that then everyone wrote about, because that like one split-second scene where they're in a concentration camp.
Yeah,
and everyone, like, I guess like the Jewish League of Germany came out and said like, you can't do that. And if you look at then the whole video, it's like, okay, like I don't know if you can do a concentration camp scene tastefully, but it's not glorified. Like, it's obviously like at the end they murder all the fucking Nazis.
They blow off the faces of the Nazis. That was cool.
Yeah,
like
and it also has people. Then the thing I thought was really cool too is that they had like every victim of the band, or every band was a different victim that then was persecuted by the Nazis. If you saw the thing on,
I saw the pink triangle, which is homosexuality. Yeah.
So I think that, you know, okay, of course, like Rammstein aren't Jews or gay or whatever, but the sense of like showing them the visibility of then who also the Holocaust did, you know, for entire groups of people that the Nazis did round up. I personally had no problem with that. Then again, I'm not part of one of the groups that were targeted. But so there was that. There was World War II. There was GDR. There's like the Germanen, so like the pre-German peoples going around like on the horses and stuff. Or maybe that was like the era of like Karl the first or whatever.
Yeah, it looks a little like Teutonic kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's that whole deal, like the Holy Roman Empire. No, I think it actually is the Holy Roman Empire, right? Because that was actually German. I've learned very recently, like Charlemagne and all that.
Oh yeah, that was basically Germany and a bit of north of Italy. Yeah.
So there's that. Then there's the what else? I think there's like the 20s in general, where they're like in that bar fist fighting.
Oh, so like the booming 20s, like there's that whole TV series at the moment, Berlin Babylon.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you also have the 70s with the RAF.
Okay, right.
Where they're dressed, where half of them are dressed in drag.
Yeah.
I guess because to be the other members of the RAF. I don't know, but that one was actually like, I saw it, I got it at first, but then I was like kind of confused. I'm like, wait, why are they dressed like this way? That one made the least. I mean, it makes sense to me historically, but then like how they executed it, I was kind of confused. But it doesn't matter. And
Then there's like some future astronaut shit where
that part I didn't get at all.
Germania gives birth to German shepherds.
Yeah. But I'm also like, I mean, like, I think that the general concept of the video, that then it being pretty much like against the concept of Germany, is pretty clear. I mean, if you want to then go and like find like the, you know, what each and everything means, I mean, you could spend probably 2 or 3 hours.
All right, and welcome to this week's Corner Späti.
Yeah, we've been just watching YouTube, and we're actually a YouTube Reacts channel now.
Yeah, we're the Fine Brothers.
Yeah.
Oh God, they're trash. That's a different podcast, I'm sure. That's a different episode. This week, Yulia and Rob aren't here.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rob's off fucking around in Italy, or as I like to call it, South Germany. Bring back the Holy Roman Empire. And Yulia is at a park.
I can totally understand that.
Yeah, it's a lovely day, and we're inside watching.
We're dumb being podcasters.
Yeah.
She has an actual life. Yeah, but in all seriousness, we did sit down and just watch YouTube videos this week, and
pretty much
ended up with the episode now that we're going to give you, which is
it's an extended react.
It is, yeah.
Actually, that'd be kind of hilarious if we just did this as just like showing clips from this Jan Boehmermann video and then just
but like not showing them, just have it only as us as audio.
Yeah, no, just like it's going through these normal clips and like, you know, kids react to fucking Jan Boehmermann, and then like cuts to us and it's just 40-minute rant about the history of a unified Europe.
Yeah.
And the concept.
So you already gave it away. Today's lovely topic is not Rammstein. It is what is it?
The real pop sensation of Europe.
The United States of Europe. Is that what it's called?
United States of Europe. Yeah. USA.
I don't want to watch this video again. Turn it off.
I'm putting.
No, it's so bad.
Oh, Jesus.
So I guess a little backstory.
Yeah.
Not backstory, but just
context.
Yeah. So Jan Boehmermann, who is kind of like the German equivalent of like the Daily Show, I guess.
Yeah. So he does the show Neo Magazine Royale.
Yeah.
Which is
he thinks he's funny and he's not actually funny. He's.
I would say it's weird. All right, so let's give the context. Let's try to give a bit more factual. Just like there is a late night kind of like semi-political, just like talking at the camera comedy show, like The Daily Show, like Last Week Tonight with forgotten his name, and like there's a million of one of these. John Oliver.
John Oliver.
That's it.
Let's say never mind. Let's say Oliver Stone.
Yeah, there's a million one of those in the States. There's a couple here, but I think Neo Magazine Royale is kind of like taken
the biggest, because there used to be the Heute Show, which was literally just like, it is an exact ripoff
Today
of the Daily Show.
That's what Heute means, yeah.
And then Jan Boehmermann kind of took off a few years ago with being more like a comedy talk show, but then also dealing with current events, you know, like in a satirical manner. He made like music videos, kind of like a John Oliver thing, but I wouldn't put him as. I mean, John Oliver, I think, is like thinks that he's like the last good journalist that then exists when his show is actually kind of garbage.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about that. I agree that he identified one problem with those shows, which is there wasn't a call to action at the end of them. At the end of like the Last Week Tonight, there is call to actions. Yeah, but he still can't see forest from the trees. Usual liberal criticism of the status quo. Yeah.
And that like people watch John Oliver and think that they're like the smartest fucking people in the room.
Yeah.
And people watch Jan Boehmermann and they're just like, oh yeah, like this is funny. What's going on? Like, okay, cool.
He's been making it big, like more internationally, because he started doing stuff that went directly to YouTube in English.
Yeah. And I think the first big one was the Janos Varoufakis
It was, yes.
Which
was just talking about how pimp Yanis Ferris.
Which was, yeah. To be fair, like, it was actually a good, like, in my opinion, it was cool seeing then, like, a German comedian realize that, like, Germany's position in the Greek crisis was fucking shit.
Yeah.
So, like, he isn't, like, I guess I need to, like, rephrase, like, he isn't just, he isn't completely dumb. He is, like, he's, like, a typical, like, social democrat on most things. And then also gained international fame with his poem that he wrote to Erdogan.
Yeah.
Where then he just literally just calls him a goat fucker and shit like that.
Yeah.
Which is horribly problematic.
That is horribly problematic. It drew attention to a law in the German books, which I think, especially the international press, was like, oh, this exists in Germany. I don't agree with this. That citizens can't technically on a public level insult other presidents or like leaders of countries. Yeah. I think the international community after that happened was like, we don't agree that should be a law. So
he kind of became this like free speech warrior sort of thing, but like didn't become an alt-right idiot.
Yeah, he still has like weird like left liberal, I would say.
He campaigns, I think, for like the SPD when they do elections and stuff like that. Like him and like the other late night comedy people are very much like SPD members, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. Maybe he's like, you know,
because there's been like moments in his stuff that he's kind of indicated that he has decent politics, and there's some good jokes in that Yanis Varoufakis one. I still love the line because the whole premise is like him talking about how great Germany is, and then Yanis Varoufakis comes along and fucks it all up.
Yeah, fucking pimp.
Yeah. But like one of the lines is like, "We are Germany. We started and almost won 2 world wars."
Yeah, like it is like that one is really clever in my opinion. But the other videos that he's put out have been kind of like,
I have like basically no access to the German speaking stuff.
Okay,
myself.
yeah, like there's one that then where he talks about like how much he loves the police.
Oh, I did see that. Yeah.
Because I guess his dad was a police officer or something like that. And so he kind of takes on, this is like way too much German bullshit, but he takes on like this like Haftbefehl like persona. Haftbefehl is like a gangster rapper in Germany.
Okay.
And then he actually then had beef with Haftbefehl after this video came out. So yeah, it's just dumb shit like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, his newest video then is kind of Yulia first thought that it was satire.
Yeah.
You and I thought it was serious.
Yeah.
And then at the end of watching the video, Yulia came onto our side and was like, yeah, this is definitely like he's not being satirical. He's using his comedy to legitimately promote the idea of this weird
United States
of Europe.
Yeah.
And we will put, if you haven't already seen the video, of course, it will be in the show description.
In the show notes, yeah. Like a little bit about the like comedy aesthetic. He's obviously clearly... I bet you this is 100% what happened in the writer's room. United States of Europe, final countdown. We're doing an 80s glam rock thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%
exactly.
what they did.
And if it was satire, that would have been really funny. But
there was this weird period in the 80s where you just named your band after a continent, because there was a band called Asia as well.
Yeah, there was a band called Asia. It is true. Weren't they like a also a hair metal band?
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Yeah.
With synth metal. It's weird. The reason I knew it wasn't satire is because, for anyone who doesn't know me, this is the kind of like modern liberal conception of the United States of Europe, or like the idea of a European Federation or whatever the fuck, is like the shit that I deep dive into myself. So I recognize the like confused liberal attitude towards the United States of Europe, which this video is 100% that.
All right, so let's I don't know anything really about the concept of a united Europe, aside from the fact that we're in the European Union, and isn't that enough?
I mean, okay, so that would be like one kind of lib criticism of the European Union, which they feel like a lot of the problems caused in the European Union is basically it half-assed making a federation.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I can agree with that.
Yeah. Because like political scientists have said that like European Union's not a federation, but it does have characteristics of it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just want to break down some of the like good and bad shit that was in this music video.
Yeah. Should we start with the good?
I'll do some good. Mainly, most of the good comes at the end of the video, where it like cuts to a fictional television scene of the first, as they call it, prime president of the the United States of Europe being sworn in, and it like they claim they want to make a giant welfare state, end pollution in like 5 years' time. Probably, and these are like good lib points. Probably the most interesting one was like break up Facebook and Google and turn them into like democratic co-ops, and I'm like, oh, okay,
yeah, cool. So far, so good.
I like this shit. Was there any good shit that you kind of like noted?
No, because I was sitting there just in awe that this video got made. Like, there's the part where and I'm pretty sure this is in the bad, but
Yeah.
where there's like this. I can't remember like exactly, but there's like a girl who like is like watching TV or whatever, and then she like gets really into this idea of like a United States of Europe, and then she like takes her jacket off and she has a tattoo of Winston Churchill's face on her back.
Yeah.
And I was just like, and at that point I thought it was a joke, because I thought that most people who are like center left also acknowledged that like Winston Churchill was kind of a fucking monster, but no, they're like they buy into the whole fairy tale that
we'll fight them on the beaches. Yeah, because he's still on British money. Like, he's still...
That doesn't mean shit. Look who's on American money.
Oh, no, but, like, there's still a lot of American, like, center-left people who don't recognize what's wrong with the people on the money.
True, yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of the space that you get.
But yeah, that was like a step like that. I was not expecting that, and just saw that and was done. I knew that at that point that I wasn't going to take the rest of the video seriously, and that happens like the first 30 seconds.
Yeah.
It's
They
like
also
a 6-minute video.
They have some like Churchill quotes at the beginning as well.
True. Yeah, I forgot
Yeah.
about that. They have Churchill. They also have like, what is it, like Konrad Adenauer or something
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, like all these dipshits in European history that I thought when it started that it was going to be a joke.
Yeah.
But
That's
it
fair.
wasn't. Yeah.
So I guess the really confused, like the definitely confused like 100% liberal idea that's gotten very confused is what is basically primer for like a European Republic fash imagery. Like basically.
Yeah, shit, I totally forgot about that as well.
Yeah, because basically
oh my God.
the girl who's watching it throughout the video basically becomes Europa.
Yeah.
Which in Greek myth is a lady, and she's involved with a bull that, knowing Greek myths, they probably bone at some time.
Of course they did.
And
just how like overwhelmingly white the video is.
Oh
too.
yeah, I had to check that as well, because also there's a lot of mixed imagery in this, because they also like. Yeah, it's a Europe-style hair metal band, but they're also taking cues from like Aha's "Take on Me" music video, like the whole she climbs into the comic book thing. So, but there is like they've made a comic book character illustration for each country in Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had to.
They
like,
went by too fast. I couldn't like.
Oh no, I went frame by frame, because you can do that on YouTube videos using the directional keys. Yeah, they're all white. Like,
that's fucking cool.
I was just like, not even the French one. Come on.
Who was your favorite superhero in that one?
Oh fuck, I can't remember what they did for Ireland. It was like Iron Shamrock, like this Iron Man type thing. Yeah. There was this one lad
That's
called...
just embarrassing.
there was this one lad called Belgique, and it was just this dandy with a pretzel.
That's the thing that I always kind of like too with a lot of these like very pro-Europe, just liberals in general, is that they really also love these horrible stereotypes of like these like
of the individual European countries.
Countries
100%.
that are, for most of them, probably like not that offensive. Of like a again the Belgian one or whatever.
Yeah.
But like there was I think the Italian one was just like a caricature of an Italian person.
He had pizza.
Yeah. It was like...
So it is this kind of very liberal concept, especially when talking about the idea of a unified Europe, of in a very aesthetic way, kind of conceding ground to the right.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Each country being personified, the whole fair maiden Europa thing is very kind of, that screamed very fash to me. And there was a lot of like blue and yellow, and I know that there's this thing in Germany where the European flag is flown because there's too much guilt about flying the German flag, essentially.
I love going to protests and demonstrations and seeing those very few people who bring EU flags. There was one that we were at for like against the AfD.
Okay.
And people were just bringing the EU flag.
Yeah.
And I was like, this has nothing. Like, what, you think that the alternative to the AfD then is like what, a unified Europe? Like that.
Yeah,
the AfD can still exist within that frame and function perfectly fine.
A little bit is because a lot of people have bought into the concept, because a lot of these parties and a lot of this resurgent right came out and their big talking point was being anti-EU, and a lot of them have shied away from that, including the AfD. And I don't think enough of the like political center has not realized that was never actually a big issue to them.
No.
It was it's in the same way you see like the bullshit of just like, oh, I'm triggering the libs, and it's just like the most insignificant cultural symbol that they've like decided to like burn half their house down to destroy or something like that. Like what they fucking did with the Nike shoes.
Yeah.
Or anytime like an American like chud says, oh, we're going to get Bill Maher cancelled, I'm like, all right, cool.
My favorite was when what is it, with the Colin Kaepernick scandal in the US.
Yeah.
Which, you know about that?
I do.
Okay,
I do.
Okay. I was wondering, like, maybe that was one of the things that like Europe didn't like fully.
They had to explain American football to us first, but then
Oh, okay, yeah. So the funniest thing was always seeing on Twitter just the people just like destroying their like $300 like NFL jerseys. So like, I fucking hate the NFL. Like, this pisses me off.
Yeah, so that's basically the USE video.
But there is a serious conversation to be had about
Yes.
USE, and that's I
Yes.
think what we want to segue into more or less is that
Pretty
they're-
much, because I would say,
And I don't know shit about this, so when you brought this idea up to me, I'm like, okay, cool. I can maybe I can learn something.
this is either gonna be terrible or brilliant. the thing was,
I'll just be here to like ad lib.
yeah, fair enough. So it is definitely becoming like way more of a topic nowadays. I want to say, maybe this is because I've always been deep diving into like European level politics, like EU level politics, and that's where all
Check out Ciarán's other podcast, previously in Europe.
that is where like all the people who are mad into a unified Europe like go to Brussels. Like that's obviously what you would want to do if that was your like big political hill that you like want to die on. And that being said, it is becoming definitely more of a topic that's, I feel like it's been taken more seriously in continental Europe or like Eurozone Europe, being like, we all use the same currency, let's go. And like one big part of that is like, I'm not a huge person to know too much about like how currencies work, but like the fact that we're sharing a currency across
is very bad.
Yeah, so
That's just
yeah,
that's my 2 cents.
That's
it's
true,
extremely complex when you have like, I mean, the idea then of having a currency would be then based off then like the productivity of your economy in a certain sense now. And when you're leveling that up against like Germany and France, whose currencies were pegged at the dollar and pegged to gold into the 70s, actually 1977 is when they became free floating.
Yeah.
And then you have these two massive economies that the US pretty much made sure were good for the reason of Reconstruction, then be the ones to kind of push for a unified like big reason why Great Britain didn't want to be on it was because, you know, you kind of have to level out then the value of your currency, which was worth more than the, you know, when the euro was being toyed with, and you'd have to literally devalue your currency to then match the economies then of like Italy, Greece, and Spain and all these other countries. And like for example, Greece, when they joined the euro in I think 2002 or 2004.
They're one of the founding members, 2002.
Yeah, so Greece had to completely revalue their currency before they went in to go on the euro, which is like a normal thing, but just to like put it into perspective is that when you have non-equal economies going on a same currency, like it is already from the start a problem, at least in my opinion. And I think that the economics behind it pretty much shows that it is extremely difficult, and we can see too with then how the euro, whenever there is a euro crisis, how it reverberates through the eurozone is much different than when like the United States has a crisis. Now, given when the U.S. has a crisis, then Europe has a crisis, but the U.S. can deal with their crisis internally with their own monetary system that they don't have to kind of, you know, meet in a very complex manner. Yeah. And I mean, for example, you know, not to get too nerdy on the economic side of it, but like, you know,
go off, King.
You know, like the euro's been at 0%, has a 0% interest rate for like the past 2 years now.
Yeah.
And has not seen any growth. And it's because of this complex nature that then no one wants to invest in this currency because they kind of just like, you know, not that they don't trust it, but it just is like, the complexities of a capitalist system, just simply as that. They were even debating doing negative interest rates so that you would get paid money to invest in euros.
Okay.
Like Switzerland does
Sign
that.
me up.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a multi-billion-dollar corporation or you just have money just sitting around, yeah, you could do that.
Yeah.
And so I mean, just there are a lot of problems with that just at the get-go.
Yeah.
It like I think first and foremost, at least for me, the Euros, like the European Union and the logical conclusion of the Eurozone is entirely that the European Union was always economic in its construction. And I think most people wouldn't disagree with that.
Yeah, so I think we'll get into that a little bit later, but like one of the liberal solutions to the problem of the euro is to become one country. Like they point to the fact that like America can do this with their currency because it's one country or acts as such anyway. So like this whole discussion of the United States of Europe is becoming more and more prevalent. Like the fact that you have like what we kind of said earlier is the biggest like German satire show just like openly advocate for it. And I don't think this is the first time that Jan Boehmermann has done that. I've seen other stuff he's done in the past. He also like he's also done stuff where he wanted to create a league of all these like types of shows in the various European countries
Yeah,
that collaborate with each other. Yeah.
I think that started with the Trump
Yes.
thing where it was like Make America Great Again.
Yeah.
Or like America First, and then every
America
country,
first, Germany second.
and Netherlands second, and like people could vote on it, and it was like kind of like, I don't know. It was funny to see then other countries kind of just use their stereotypes about like why they should be second.
Yeah.
You know?
There was some good like punching at themselves, whatever, and they're like there is something nice and
there were a few
utopian.
countries who just like legitimately took the challenge seriously.
But there is like this is why I can't fault Jan Boehmermann on this particular issue, because he does seem like idealistic and utopian in his kind of view of this. So I'm like, okay, your heart's in the right place, I guess. I just don't agree with your prescription. And also this weird thing where they just keep wanting to annex Ukraine, which...
Oh, yeah, true. On that map, Ukraine is continuously, like, part of Europe.
Yeah, so it's not a map of the European Union. It's a map of the European Union plus... Okay, everywhere else that it colors in that's not the European Union is at least, like, in some sort of other agreement with the EU, like EFTA or European Economic Area, or is like a prospective member, like the Western Balkans countries.
Yeah.
Ukraine just comes in completely. Just like, and it's also like, Ukraine, yes. Belarus? Nah. Belarus is too far gone. We can't that. And of course not Turkey, because, yeah, we'll get into that later as well.
I'm here to go off.
Cool. All right, we're going to briefly go through the concept of like, I'm probably going to flip between the terms USE and like Unified Europe. Basically what I'm saying is
The same thing.
Yeah, effectively the same thing. And we'll get into how like the huge problem of this is like how no one is really willing to go into detail about how to do this, or what they envision. So this shit starts in the late 1800s, when this stuff is like first being brought up. And this also like came around the same time that people were talking about the idea of like something that would eventually become the League of Nations and then the UN. But like but there was definitely people in Europe being like, no, we can't have discussions with the Asians. We'll have our own version of it here. And a lot during this period and the interwar period, it's kind of unclear about whether like people are actually talking about a European republic or just like a mini UN, which that became a bit of a schism later. But yeah, like some people were also talking more explicitly about a USA clone. But this is also back when the USA was a bit more confederal than it is now as well. First big name in this is Giuseppe Mazzini, who is famous for unifying Italy, and he kind of saw the unification of Europe as the like next logical step. So presumably he's talking about a parliamentary republic, because that's what Italy became kind of for a while. Although Mazzini is like a fine figure, he got into a lot of like sloppy fights with Marx. Marx basically considered him an idiot.
Good. And
Mazzini considered him mean.
That's it?
It's basically the summary of both of their arguments. I'm sure there's like reams and reams of Italian text that explains it in more detail, but that's what I could figure out. In terms of like the left in this period that were advocating for like a united Europe, you had both Bakunin and Trotsky, who were like big advocates of this. Bakunin was advocating for it because I think he saw the writing on the wall of World War One and was like, would not.
But so did Engels, so I mean.
Yeah. But like his solution to it was like, rather than us all getting into a fucking pissing contest with each other, unify. And obviously he saw it in like a typical anarchist way of federations all the way down. Like you probably federate your building that you lived in, kind of thing. And then Trotsky also called for a United States of Europe before the revolutions in Russia, kind of. But again, he specifically said, like, first of all, he included Russia in his analysis, which is something that does and does not happen sometimes. And he was like, wanted a proletariat republic. So
like the USSR.
Basically USSR, but Europe. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, pretty baller. Then we get into World War II. And this is when all the like fucking weirdos come out.
Wait, so let me catch up for my very smooth brained self when it comes to this. So after World War One, this all, because this is like after World War One too, you have then like just the collapse of empires too. That also brings into the discussion of then like how I guess it comes like, you know, retroactively that then like when World War II happens, people kind of look back. I mean, I know that you're going to talk about that now, but I think a lot of people forget that when you have the collapse of, you know, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, now again is Turkey, Europe is a bigger question, but when it comes to then like the population exchanges and stuff like that, and just people who are just left in these falling empires that then are stateless.
I'd say the Ottoman Empire certainly was European. Like a lot of land was in what we would consider Europe. And
Balkans and all that fun stuff.
Exactly, yeah.
But given they were already independent at that time, but they still had then people of citizens who were still living in what is then now like modern day Turkey and these areas, who then got, you know, shipped on over back to Europe.
Yeah.
Who technically never lived there. And then you have the Armenian genocide too and all the other fun stuff. But so like World War One kind of is like this like watershed moment of the idea then of not only just Europe then like Europe's empires collapsing, but then the idea then of nationhood drastically changing as well. Yeah. So internally, even like without the idea then of like of a unified Europe or not, like you have a lot of you know, like the formations of concentration camps that were used in Africa then are then brought to Europe to kind of contain people in a refugee crisis that they had in the 20s and 30s because of just misplaced peoples and whatnot, and it ends up fueling a lot of the anger that then comes into World War II. Yeah. So just a
you're like 100% right. My World War II section of the history here, I would say, includes a bit of like pre-World War II. Yeah. The reason I'm doing this though is because it's really hard to separate what is like people reeling from World War One, like what you're basically talking about, and all the effects.
It's like one like block of
but there's also a lot of people in here who are advocating for some form of united Europe because again they're seeing the writing on the wall of what eventually becomes World War II. So the big like concentrated efforts, or like probably more formal and wonky efforts, was you got within the League of Nations, which fucking throwback Thursday. There was a lot of like French and British like politicians and diplomats who were very much advocating for this idea within the League of Nations. Another thing that is like a big part of this is after World War One and during World War One, it becomes apparently clear that Europe is not necessarily going to be on top of the world order after these events. So how do we kind of like maintain the global hegemony that Europe has? Because I don't know if they were correctly guessing that it would be the USA and the USSR at that point, but they knew it wasn't going to be them. So that's like a part of it as well.
Well, I think that probably goes into just like the collapse of empire that they saw from the end of World War II. Like they all pretty much dissolved what holdings they had. I mean, okay, Great Britain has one last stab in Palestine and in like Iraq and whatnot, but as a whole, like their share of the earth that they controlled after World War One drastically decreases.
There's that being said though, like the big like pushback from this like creation of united Europe was there was a lot of people at the time who believed that Europe would maintain its global power through its colonies. They didn't see the like further shedding of colonies that would happen during World War II and like the global 60s. That was like also going to happen. Like Churchill was a big part of that, and a lot of people in France also were as well, because France still owned like huge swaths of Africa. And also like a lot of Mussolini's strategy during World War II was like he also believed this was the way things were going. That's why he tried snatching up a whole bunch of shit in Africa.
Yo, what's up, Ethiopia?
Yeah, right. So
did you know that there's a bust of him carved into like the side of a mountain in Ethiopia?
Mussolini?
Yeah.
Fucking hell.
I don't know if it's still there, but I know that then when the Italians came and, you know,
occupied
the country and then got kicked out like 2 years later. They built this like monument in the side, like it's fucking crazy. I'll show it to you after we record.
Fucking Christ. You'd want to demolish that, but that's very quick work for them. Like, imagine just immediately going into Ethiopia and so fucking confident of yourself, even though your military leader couldn't fucking invade Greece, and just be like, yeah, let's build a statue of him. We'll be here forever. Yeah, so yeah, French and British diplomats were pushing this idea. You also have Wilhelm II within Nazi Germany. During World War II, was like, oh, it's pretty cool that Europe is being unified under German leadership.
Wait, I don't think he lived in Germany at that time. I think he lived in the Netherlands, but it was like very openly in support of the Nazi government.
Right, fair enough, yeah. But he's he's referring to Nazi Germany creating a united Europe, which is oof.
Adolf Hitler, Time Person of the Year, 1936.
Fucking Christ.
Or what was it, 1933? I can't remember.
In 1923, you have basically a bunch of people nostalgic for the Austro-Hungarian Empire create the like Pan-Europa Manifesto and the Pan-European movement, who's like not first president, but second president of that was literally one of the Habsburgs. President of that like movement. Oswald Mosley also wanted a unified Europe.
So all the coolest of the cool wanted.
Yeah, he had a particularly beautiful vision of it, of just like, yeah, a great big unified Europe, and also that apartheid thing that's happening in South Africa, but across the entire continent of Africa.
Well, that what is it? The German idea of then like a unified Europe, which would not German, the Nazi German idea of a unified Europe was the exact same thing as well. Just like, oh yeah, like Ukraine will be our slave labor.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. There was like this idea that like the nation state can't maintain itself without just horrifying colonial practices,
which is true.
Yeah,
like it is. Unfortunately, the thing that at least like fascists get right is that they love the nation state a lot, and they also love imperialism a lot.
Yeah.
Now,
they recognize the same failings of the nation state that we do, but they're like, it's cool and good actually.
Yeah,
we should
like
do more.
It's always like there is like a really interesting take that I forget the book, but I have it on my Kindle. It was written by some Italian guy.
Mm-hmm.
About then how there's like just like, and this is a very typical Marxist take of that, then that liberalism and the development of fascism kind of go hand in hand with one another, that then fascism is the more extreme version of then like the tried and true ideals of liberalism. But he really goes through and like breaks down then how, like, you know, where we see this, like where it isn't actually like where that claim, you know, comes to, you know, realization. And it's an interesting thing to like take things like race science and stuff like that, obviously, that we now associate, oh, you know, that's not a part of liberal ideals. And when then you look at like scientific papers from like the years, I don't know, like 1850s being promoted by liberals of like, see, like, look, like the skulls are different there. And now how fascists just like still adopt obviously that race science into the way that they view the world now. But it originates from then an idea that then of liberals who are also typically on the wrong side of history.
Right. So we'll get into actually a little bit of that like larger theory later, because I want to go into more detail about it, because I'll explain. But this is probably the most like pimp aspect of like a unified European concept, especially from a left-wing perspective, which is it's an Italian word. I'm probably going to not pronounce it correctly. I think manifesto is an Italian word as well, but fuck it. Ventotene Manifesto, which is named for an island that Mussolini put all the like political prisoners on. It's just an island in the Illyrian Sea. But basically, in 1941, a bunch of Italian Antifa commies, namely one guy called Altiero Spinelli and Ernesto Rossi, wrote this manifesto, encouraging a socialist federation of European states as a means to basically rebuild the continent after this war had ended. The interesting thing about this manifesto is, first of all, very fucking hard to get an English translation of it. It's quite short and it's written in Italian. But the thing is, it was also like crowdsourced. Like those two authors are the ones who are attributed to it, but it was crowdsourced amongst the like 800 prisoners on that island. like they all just kind of like were openly discussing with one another they were writing this book, and people in the prison would just contribute like thoughts, and there was just these like discussions in like the prison grounds about like, oh yeah, you should put this in the book, and they're like, what are you talking about? That idea is stupid, fuck you. Like, and it's worth pointing out that these 800 prisoners, about 700 of them were classified as, I think 500 were classified as communists, and an additional 200 were classified as anarchists, and then like 100 belonged to the liberal front that tried to oppose Mussolini. So like this fucking manifesto gave some cool stock.
So we will not have a link in the description for this one.
No, because it's not fucking in English. You can, if you read Italian, you can look up the Ventotene Manifesto. So that's the history. What do you think of all that shit? It's mostly fascists.
Yeah, I feel like I'm just like Joe Rogan right now, where you're the very smart person on the podcast, and you're telling me stuff that I'm just like, yeah, fucking cool. Like, and just like very uncritically listening to these things. I'm gonna become like a Eurofascist now.
Oh, good, yeah. That was the plan all along.
Okay, cool. But I mean, like yeah, the fascist idea of a unified Europe is something I've always kind of like. I mean, if you have contact, especially now with people who are in like the alt-right, very much like we have to preserve Western civilization thing, yes. They kind of drum up the same ideas and fervor that these people in the 30s and 40s were doing. It's like, oh, we need to preserve white culture, and that means, I mean, like Richard Spencer says the same shit like a lot of the time, that then Europe needs to be a unified thing. I mean, it goes back to the thing we were talking about, like this weird phenomenon of the right being internationalist,
yes,
but only in Europe, obviously, or in the US, and that they love Netanyahu as well.
Yeah,
but
basically internationalists with the countries they're willing to like shake hands with, essentially.
White, yeah. Just a bunch of fucking white countries, and like this it's hard to imagine that now today, obviously, of like, oh, I thought always fascists really hate each other, but then when you actually kind of like look into the history then too of then the stuff like you said, 30s and 40s, that these ideas aren't all that foreign. Fascists just want to work with other fascists.
Yeah.
Until then you have like that Star Trek episode where they all just start like having power struggles against one another and trying to kill each other. So which is what like what happened in Romania. Like there was a fascist party that I don't fucking remember their name. I don't speak Romanian, but like their military wing was called like the Iron Guard. Or something.
Yep.
And they were like more insane. I know this is hard to imagine because of the atrocities that Nazi Germany committed, but their ideas of the world were far crazier than what the Nazis did, and the Nazis actually purged them when they went into Romania.
This is too hardcore.
Yeah. So because it was like National Socialism mixed with a shit ton of Catholicism.
Ah, good.
Or Eastern Orthodoxy.
No, that'd be Eastern Orthodox if it's Romania, yeah.
So wild. So
yeah, because like this is, I think it's important to talk about this because like, especially like a left-wing concept of a united Europe, because like, and we'll get to it later, but my central thesis of like why the left should have an idea of unified Europe, or like what to do with the European Union, which are very related questions, because it's getting to the point now where like the libs and the fascists certainly do. They certainly have an idea of what to do for it, and like, either we said off mic or at the beginning of this podcast, my brain is mush, but the fact that like a lot of these far right parties that are rising in Europe have all kind of like abandoned their like,
you said that earlier on the recording,
their criticism of the European Union, and they're happy to like unify it. And also like at the same time, why wouldn't they? Like the European Union has an absolutely brutal external border policy that's aimed towards non-white countries, and and
I always get the feeling that them from especially the like the Eurosceptic left or whatever, that they understand they understand like the brutality of what the of what the EU does. To other countries, they understand it as being kind of also then a continuation of like a buffer zone to like Russia and whatnot, being kind of this continuation of
it's
a
like
containment
a Cold War
policy.
Project.
given not all members are part of NATO, but they kind of function in that way as being like partner nations with NATO.
I think the biggest tell would be the fact that like Finland didn't bother to join the European Union until the fall of the Soviet Union.
Yeah,
because Finland recognized that it was.
Yeah, and like it still is very much that, especially with seeing then like again Ukraine is on that map from that music video.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there is very much the European desire of wanting to claim Ukraine as part of this project. But like within all that of legitimate criticism of what it is, it's still like kind of like at the end of the day, like and I know I'm going to sound like a member of fucking like DM25 or whatever, but the system that then's in place of Europe is of unified European countries kind of being able to function in this whatever it is, this union, this federation, whatever it is, can be far more beneficial for Europe than if you cling on to the nation state idea of each and every individual country. So I kind of like do I have to like in that sense I will accept the lesser of two evils there. Like I'll accept a brutal EU than, you know, Hungary, Germany, France, and Italy, or whoever the fuck it is who are just becoming insane right now, just going at it if there wasn't like a... And I'll give it, like the EU's like politically is horribly complex, horribly technocratic. The Eurozone is horrible for a country that then does not have, you know, a massive economy. Like there are, you know, these things that I can obviously see are bad, but completely ditching it and going back to the nation state concept is not an option.
Yeah, I think the other thing is like the idea that if we left the European Union, we could become a socialist utopia is like, that's possible, but you can't really guarantee that for every country after the collapse of the European Union, because like more of them, you could say to be generous, you could say for every country that turns into something socialist and good, another country will turn fash. My pessimistic outlook is that if the European Union collapsed, a lot of countries would turn super fash.
I think most of the like really powerful European countries would turn fash. We see that even with the European Union just existing. Regardless of having an EU critical point, like they just really love the nation state too on top of it.
Yeah.
And there is like a conflicting sovereignty that exists obviously within the European Union, but to that other point though, if like I'm just imagining if I don't know, like there'd only be certain countries that then could like become socialist in that sense. Like if
and maintain itself without being,
like let's say that then I don't know, like Portugal becomes socialist. I mean, you even see this too within the EU as well, or within like
the election of Cyprus could be like, or Syriza could be seen.
Exactly that. Like I know that like the term like what is it, Syrization has been, or Syrification?
No, pacification. Like, to be turned into PASOK. Yeah.
So that everyone complains that then like whenever you know a socialist government gets existed in a small peripheral European country that they just, you know, appease liberals. It's like they don't have an option half the time. Because at least in the case of Greece, there was always a sense that then the European and the internal governmental bureaucratic structures would just like not inform the government of things that were happening so that they would fail. Like there is, depending on how big and powerful your country is, you can't sustain yourself as a social. I mean, look at Venezuela, you know, like good example.
Google
Venezuela. You know, like it is extremely hard to then make yourself, especially if you're a smaller nation, given Venezuela has money because of oil. But let's say that then if Greece or Portugal decides like, okay, we're going to become socialists now, they have no industry. Like,
absolutely.
And sanctions against these countries would.
And even like the fact that like Venezuela was only able to get on its feet because basically of the pink wave. It happened in South America that a handful of countries, and then you also had Cuba sitting there, were able and willing to support you transition to this kind of like, slightly transition to this type of government. Attempt to transition. That's probably a better word. There's again no guarantee that would happen. If Portugal became socialist, you would really want Spain to also be socialist, or France or Ireland or the UK or whatever, like some periphery like neighboring countries. And to be fair too, Venezuela's been able to like keep themselves afloat because they've been able to they have hyperinflation right now. But previously to that, they generated revenue through having the world's largest oil reserves. Like they based stupidly everything on this thing that you can easily just boycott and sanction. And
Then an economic crisis.
and again, like I think the more credit goes to something like Cuba. Managing to like hold on despite absolutely fucking brutal sanctions in that country is like probably the exception that proves the rule, though, rather than anything else. Because like every other country that like nominally claimed to remain socialist either is no longer socialist or is brutalized to the point that it can't be socialist. Yeah. So anyway, that whole concept of like, yeah, we possibly need to do something with Europe. I think another big point about like why you want to have an answer for like a unified Europe or like what to do with Europe is because something that I feel like a lot of like left anti-EU will like fail to acknowledge or want to talk about or just don't know about it, if I'm being generous, is the fact that the concept, the basic layman's concept of the European Union is still incredibly popular.
Yeah.
Most people who like the European Union, I think from our perspective and from anyone on the left's perspective, would be that you don't really know enough about like how it works. There's a lot of brutal things like you said, and that's not common knowledge. And usually when you pitch it to people, they're usually horrified. Yeah. Like again, the whole drowning in the Mediterranean, they were horrified at that. They just didn't know the EU was
it's always kind of like it's always kind of that thing that then like when you first get into like finding out, like at least for me, like when you first find it, like you get the information that the United States is a pretty shit country.
Yeah.
When it comes to international relations, or when it comes to then like, you know, poverty in the country itself.
Yeah.
And you become like overzealously anti-American. You know?
Yeah.
Where you're just like, oh yeah, like North Korea is against the United States. I'm fucking pro Yucha then at this point. And you see a lot of that on Twitter and stuff like that. Or like they're like, oh yeah, like I'm an Assadist, but I'm left wing.
Yeah.
You know, and I kind of get the same thing from younger people, especially when they find out the bad stuff about Europe, is that then they become overzealously than the exact antithesis of that. And like for a lot of people, I imagine it's just like a phase if they're younger, and for like, you know, if they're older people, then obviously like I don't know, I don't have hope for them because they probably then have like, you know, made their mark with, you know, why I don't know, but I always find it to be a lot of times just kind of like a phase of younger people that they're just like very much like, yo, I found out that this thing sucks, so I'm against it no matter what.
I think it's also just like there's that understanding of the European Union, but like you have to separate that from the like common understanding of the European Union, which is it's really nice that like if things go to shit for me here, I could fucking move to another part of Europe and live there for the rest of my life. Presumably if it's better there, or if like my industry is there, or if my wife or children are there, whatever the hell. And I know there's like some material conditions, like not everyone has the money to move. That's a problem no matter whether the EU is there or not. But like the common understanding of the European Union is like open borders, and it's kind of convenient that we all have the same currency. That's usually what people are saying yes to when they're asked in a survey. And none of those concepts fly in the face of like a left-wing ideal, like open borders and that kind of shit. That's not necessarily something that you would have to impose.
Yeah.
The things that people on the left oppose with the European Union, I like to think that the general public would also oppose if they like explained it to them or like talked to them about the reality of the situation. Yeah, that's generally my kind of take on it.
Yeah. So, do we want to move on to our last talking point, which is
some of these like modern iterations?
These kind of very weird what we're seeing now currently with. We want to keep Europe. European Union's cool to a degree. Also kind of pretty shit. We're willing to accept that.
Yeah.
Let's see what we can do with it.
Yeah.
There's just some modern iterations that are just like Europe is badass because it's white and it has a continuous culture, which is complete bullshit.
Yeah.
And we want more of that. So, which one do you want to start with? Flip a coin.
Oh, Jesus. There's one that I would really want to quickly mention because it's just fucking hilarious and it doesn't take an awful lot of time to talk about. But, like, there's a Dutch guy who, when I first heard about him, they didn't explain the context of him, but his name is Freddie Heineken. So I was like, wait, let me investigate this. Yes, he is indeed the heir of the Heineken Brewing Company in the Netherlands and, like, was their CEO for a long time. In 1992, he got really into the idea of a unified Europe and like made it.
As we all do.
And we all have that phase when we're running a giant multinational brewing company and we're like, oh man, United Europe, that'd be cool. Yeah, he made a pamphlet and like sent it around to people. Main thing I want to talk to you about is that it included a map, and I would really like you to look at the map and the supposed like states of
what are these countries? I can only recognize the top part, which stayed the same, but everything else below.
Yeah. So basically, he had this idea that there would be a European federation that would be created within the EU. That's the blue, but the EU still exists, and that's the yellow and the blue.
So, like Sweden, Norway, and Finland, the Baltic nations, Great Britain, Ireland, and Iceland don't change.
Yeah.
But then
they don't become part of the federation. And then this is the federation and the constituent like members.
Shit. What are these supposed to be?
They're states. I particularly love this weird northern fucking German state, which is just
Denmark, and including something like
Hamburg
and stuff like that.
Pomeranian, whatever the fuck that place is called.
Mecklenburg-Vorpommern.
Yeah. Where Pomeranians are from. That's all I know. And again, going back.
Are they really?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
That's what Pomerania, whatever the second part of that is, the non-Mecklenburg part.
Vorpommern.
Yeah. Pomeranian.
Holy shit.
Anyway, my favorite part of this, again, coming back to the theme, is you may have noticed not all of Ukraine this time, but a good chunk of it.
A good chunk of Ukraine. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
well,
that's the part with Lviv in it, which is like the most lib/fash part of Ukraine, so I guess.
And still no Belarus.
Still no Belarus. Belarus is untouchable. Yeah, so I just wanted to mention our
I'm
boy.
just glad that in 1992 he also acknowledged that.
Yeah, right.
Their name's almost Russia. It is White Russia, so
White Russia.
we can't have it.
How do not more people want it as just like explicitly White Russia? Is there not some just like weird ethno-nationalists in the States being like, oh, White Russia? There's no Kazakhs in this.
I think it comes down to the fact that they got branded in. This is earlier than that, but now the conversation is around the Bush's axis of evil thing, and he included Belarus into that.
Did Lukashenko? Yeah.
Yes, and I mean, a lot of Europeans, like lib Europeans, see that as like the last stronghold of the Soviet Union.
Yeah, the last dictator in Europe. That's what Bush said. Yeah.
So,
yeah,
and he has a very complicated relationship with Europe and Russia. He's just kind of there.
Yeah,
like
whether Russia is included in the United Europe is often not discussed. Basically,
it's written in Russia's constitution that they are Europe. If you did not.
Yeah, no, I definitely am one to say that they are Europe because they are a giant colonial power. It's just their colonies were contiguous. Like, they just went east. And yeah it's like a European culture. Most of the people live in the European side.
Well, they went south, too.
They did go a bit south, didn't they? Yeah.
They had a little tussle with Turkey, or with the Ottoman Empire.
Anyway, the big boys that I want to talk about, mainly because they have the longest contiguous history, is the pan-European movement, which I mentioned in the history thing. Yeah. Started in 1923 by a conservative man by the name of Richard von Coudenhove-Caligari.
Is he German or what?
He is... he called himself Bohemian.
Oh, okay.
From Austro-Hungary, son of an Austro-Hungarian diplomat. Mom was a Japanese diplomat.
Okay.
Yeah. So he was like, he believed himself to embody the idea of mixing cultures and stuff like that. But there's also a part of his history where he like goes to Japan and everyone fucking hates him. So that's also hilarious. But anyway, this whole movement was founded by him. He wrote the Manifesto. The movement was founded with him and like one of the fucking Habsburgs who like died in the 70s and was the like president of it from like the beginning until the 70s. Because a lot of it was just Austro-Hungarian nostalgia. It was also, and they really tried to bury this, it was based on an ideology called Eurafrika or Eurafrika.
Could you elaborate what
Yeah.
Eurafrika is?
So, to incentivize the unification of Europe, the countries would unite their African colonial holdings, forming one super colony to support Europe. This idea was basically popular in Europe, especially amongst conservative and right-leaning Europe, from like...
You don't say.
You don't say. Oswald Mosley was a fan from 1900 up until like it only died in the 1950s when Algeria gained independence.
Wow,
that was basically the watershed moment for that ideology, where they're basically, I would give up on Africa if we can't keep Algeria. But literally, they describe, and this guy Richard von Caligula, whatever his fucking name was. Literally described in his manifesto.
Count Chocula.
Yeah. Richard Count Chocula. Literally described the European colonial holdings as like dowry to one another to like drive unification of Europe.
Oh, God.
Use the word dowry or whatever the German word for dowry is.
I don't know what the German word for dowry is.
It's translated as dowry. It's creepy. This movement kind of continued on for ages, like being firmly anti-communist. Like the only thing they actually achieved in the real world was they held a picnic during 1989 on the Austrian-Hungarian border. Being like, oh, it's all coming down. Let's have a picnic together.
That's so lame.
It's so fucking lame. The founder is really fucking weird because he had this old, like, very, like, stereotypical European aristocrat. Like, genuinely was willing to hear out any political thought as long as it came from a rich man. Like, he literally just says that.
Me too. I have the exact same opinion. Fucking plebs.
Also, fun fact, this Richard Count Chocula lad was the real-life inspiration for the character Victor Laszlo in Casablanca.
Wait, what?
Yeah. The character Victor Laszlo in Casablanca was a like direct inspiration of this
Count Chocula.
Richard von Coudenhove Caligari. I keep wanting to say in Caligula. It's not Caligula though.
It's Count Chocula.
It's Count Chocula. Richard von Count Chocula. I
don't want to actually learn how to pronounce his name. So
no, that's fine.
I'll correct you on how to pronounce Bakunin, but I will not give a shit on how to pronounce this fucking inbred aristocrat.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, actually, no, that was the problem when he went to Japan, is the Japanese were like, you're not inbred enough. your blood has been sullied with foul Czech Bohemians. Anyway, literally though, he was like a reach across the aisle guy, because he approached not only like Churchill with this idea. Churchill really liked this idea because Churchill was a big supporter of the Eurafrika concept, which is,
of course he was,
very much forgotten about in modern day. Yeah, Churchill was very much on board, but not only did he approach people like Churchill, he approached Mussolini with the idea. Mussolini was very hard to get on board with the concept. And also, like, he fled Nazi Germany, where he was living when he wrote this. Like, he wrote it in Weimar Republic Germany, but he fled when it became Nazi Germany. First to the Czech Republic, which
then became Germany.
Yeah, which didn't last long, and then he went to France, and that didn't last long. And then he finally went to the States, and then came back afterwards. Lots of people in the Nazi like ranks really liked his ideas, including the guy who was in charge of like the central bank during the whole time of like Nazi Germany. But a lot of Nazis didn't, and he was considered an enemy of the states. The Nazis eventually called him a Jew. He wasn't, and took away his degree when they annexed the university he got his degree from. He got his degree in Austria, so it was after the Anschluss or whatever that's called. Then, but this is like a lot of this is all in the history, right? Which that's fine. Like, Europe was kooky back then. But again, I want to pull a quote from their like modern website, because this society still exists, the Pan-European movement.
Still, every time you say that, I think you could say like the Pan-Hellenic movement, which is PASOK.
I think Pan-Europe would include a Pan-Hellenic. I don't know. Have you seen those states that fucking Johnny Heineken made?
Definitely. Greece is like divided up into like 3 countries. So.
South Macedonia, West Turkey, and Super Albania.
Yeah. Again, I agree with all of this.
But here's a fun quote to give you the idea, the ideology of pan-European movement. Fun quote from their website, still on today. Christianity is the soul of Europe. Our mission is characterized by the Christian image of man and the rule of law. It's like in their manifesto. They don't talk about Turkey a lot in their idea of a pan-European movement.
What about Bosnia? Is Bosnia part of Europe then?
I think 60% of Bosnia is considered Europe. Yeah, it's weird. They do a lot of language to try and couch the fact that they're like, oh yeah, Jews and Muslims are okay, but I feel like you shouldn't have to. There's a lot of text in there that really warrants you saying Jews and Muslims are okay because you went off on this other shit.
So it's just typical white nationalist shit now.
I feel like they're kind of veering that direction. They definitely associate themselves with like Christian Democrat kind of movement across Europe. Even though I would say a lot of modern Christian democratic parties have like departed from that. Christian aspect.
I always find it very weird that Angela Merkel is the head of the Christian Democrats.
Yeah,
I don't see her being very much convinced by that Christian aspect.
No,
not that she's not
virulent atheist or whatever. But
yeah. But it's just always. I mean, first off, the policy that the CDU does is really bad. But on top of it, that there are very few people who are just evangelically I'm proud as a Christian, and the only ones I can think of are like dipshits in Bayern. Yeah,
and then also a lot of overly Christian and that informs their politics. People in Europe tend not to go with the Christian Democratic parties.
Yeah. They're always on those weird offshoot party things.
Yeah, or they've gone further right. Yeah. So anyway, I feel like the pan-European movement is OG Christian Democrat, I would say. Really, Christianity is a big part of this ideology. Yeah, it's fucking weird. The next fucking... Oh god, the next fucking people in this whole cavalcade of modern pan-European things is Volt or Volt Europa. They're relatively new.
Is this the thing that is what's it called? Just go. Never. I think I know who these people are because you bitch about them all the time. Oh god, yes. That's embarrassing.
Oh god, yeah. I've just shown the website. Which is mostly just a big call to action to sign up to their newsletter. So Volt, they're running in this European election, and that's going to be their first European election, although they have run.
They're the one that are the very Macron-esque Europe.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they very much started this organization being we want to do Macron everywhere.
Do they also want that sweet 22% approval rating?
I have a funny feeling they have backpedaled from the Macron origins of their movement.
Nope.
Well, backpedaled in terms of language, but not in any actual substance. They've got chapters all over Europe.
They're a motorcycle gang too.
They've got chapters all over Europe. Look at that map. I've seen photos of their meetings. They are attended by upwards of dozens of people. Okay. The Irish ones were just embarrassing. It was 6 people attending the meetings.
I'm just imagining what Macron-style politics would do to Ireland.
Oh, God. I feel that it's already our current Prime Minister Taoiseach very much wants to be Macron before he hasn't realized that Macron is not doing well.
Yo, this economic crisis got me feeling like Irish Macron.
So fucking hell. The problem with Volt is they're just they're fucking lanyard nerds. Very
they're just technocratic Europeans who already dominate European politics, but apparently they don't realize that they dominate European politics.
Yeah. It's very hard not to look at a lot of the people very senior in this movement as just very much career politicians looking for their moments. They try to start a Twitter argument with Yanis Ferris because he referred to the EU's current government as a regime. Yeah, but they were
that's the thing that you complained to Yanis Varoufakis about. Is
apparently,
that?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, it's oh god damn it.
Because at the same time they have this whole vision and vaguely like very, very, very vague things they want to do for Europe. Namely, they think they can solve all of Europe's problem by like
making more Europe.
No, making it smarter.
That's a really lib talking point.
There's like the Estonian e-card voting system, and they're just like, that's gonna stop fascism.
That literally triggered more right-wing people into their government this last election.
No, actually it didn't. There was a rise in like a far right in Estonia, but when you compare the like e-vote versus the like live vote, it was like the e-vote was very anti that party. And
really?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm then a dumb misinformed lib then.
No, that's fine. Because you can like, the weird thing about the e-voting system is you can like vote from your phone up to 3 days in advance, but then you can also be like, I don't trust this, and then cancel it and go vote in person. Mm-hmm. It's a weird system. It's really interesting and like very insecure, but at the same time, yeah, it was like there is like an old young divide in terms of the votes, and it's like old Estonians voting for this like horrifying. Like they literally did like a tiki torch march through the streets of Tallinn kind of party. Yeah, fun shit.
We got the nerdy European Macron technocrats.
Yeah, very much middle of the ground. We can't go too far left. We can't go too far right.
Yeah, we got the white nationalists, more or less, whatever they.
I mean, they're
not really around anymore, though.
They exist, and there's like it exists mostly on the internet, but I think we're starting to see most of it now because an interview recently with Marine Le Pen, she revealed that basically like Salvini has been like effectively touring Europe or like organizing meetings with all these various parties from various European countries to make like a bigger
so the idea is alive the idea is alive and well, but with just a different, not really necessarily this group itself, but with this this very like white Christian centric Europe being adopted by the right international. For sure,
100%. Like I think the libs and their idea of like a united Europe don't do enough to counter it, to say like to open up the idea that we might welcome in other countries that aren't European, or to interrogate the idea that Europe is just as a continent is incredibly racist because like we are just fully connected to Asia. Like the idea that these are two separate continents is weird at best, and they're like, oh, but like, it's so culturally different. It was like, yeah, but so is India from the rest of a lot of Asia.
So it's like one country in Europe to the next country, or like to like the next state over.
Defining like culture in like raw numbers is a fool's errand, and then saying, oh, this is too much of a culture departure, but this is just a fine amount of culture departure. So like there's definitely like lib contingencies that aren't doing enough to like combat this, and I think there are like pan-European groups that do, like usually left ones, that are acknowledging that like we need people on the ground in Turkey. As fucking miserable as the opposition within Turkey is, we still need to be like a part of that. And I think there's also like there's a history of the fact Morocco applied to join the European Union in the 50s and was ejected for not being Europe, and I'm just like, let him in. Fuck it. But yeah, like the far right concept of a united Europe is still very much happening. Like it either exists as like circle jerking in largely American or like Australian or like settler colonial message boards, where their concept of like ethnic differences boils down to race. Whereas like that's becoming more of a thing in Europe, but still not 100% of a thing in Europe. Like there's still like in like ethnicity versus ethnicity is more important than the idea that we're all white, supposedly. But that's changing, I feel like, definitely. And then the other side of it as well is that United Europe in the typical right-wing fashion is happening in a top-down way. Like it's Marine Le Pen organizing with Salvini to make this big broad right group in a European context. But that's never going to be like what the lib or left answer to that is, which by their own definition might require like grassroots movement and appealing to common people.
I guess then grassroots movement, let's try to look at then our last fun, is it the last one?
It is, yes.
Of a movement that I'm actually not completely disgusted by, or that I just think is completely laughable. I mean, I do have some problems, obviously, with them, but they're more on a like just kind of a personal policy one,
Yeah.
Or that I think that they may be a little bit too idealistic, but I'm not gonna, berate a leftist for being too idealistic because there's
throwing stones in glass houses or something.
Yeah. So DM25.
Yeah.
Who are kind of doing a two-pronged thing with this.
Yeah. Okay.
So you have, I know that then locally within certain countries, they're also trying to run local parties to then, like, in Greece, they're running, what is it? It's like
Mera 25, yeah.
Mera 25. Is that the only, I think that's actually the only one, if I'm not mistaken.
That's the only one that has, like, the same branding, but that's not true in terms of, like, outside
affiliated parties and whatnot.
Yeah, so, like, probably the coolest party that I certainly like the most is the Polish party Razem.
Okay.
They work with Razem, and Razem, like, started as, like, a radical feminist party within Poland.
Oh, cool.
But now have like taken up the mantle of, like, a much broader left, and it literally comes from the fact that the people who founded the party were Polish people who lived in, like, the Nordic countries and were like, yeah, we need to push Poland to the left. And they came back to Poland and were like,
so they have, like, they have very much an inter-European affiliation, a strong group of affiliates. Let's just say that it's not just like, hey, we have friends over in this country. Is that they, like, if you go to the bottom of your page of the page which you've done, all the parties are then listed then too of
you go to their
who
personal
is a part
website.
of this movement.
Yeah.
And are they running individually then in their own parties in the European Parliament elections under DM25 or under their own parties?
So DM25 has made this thing called the European Spring, and that's kind of like the electoral side of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And the idea being that if members of these parties make it into the European Parliament, that they'll make a European grouping called the European Spring.
Okay, cool.
Which would be, left. The things I like about DM25 and European Spring as like an extension, because they're very interrelated.
I guess we have to, like, first specify that they are a left-wing electoral critique, like attempting to then critique the EU internally through electoralism. So you can't come at them with you can't just continually just, like, EU bash and be like, this will do nothing, this and that, because then you're talking to the wrong group. Like, they do have, like, they acknowledge the problems of the European Union. Their poster boy is Yanis Varoufakis, and like, they are EU critical, but then at the same, like, the thing that we were saying earlier is that they don't want to completely just, burn the EU down to the ground.
Yeah, their prescription for it is more hijacking the European Union rather than tearing it down. And I think they're also not necessarily against the idea of basically building something new in the shell of the European Union. Like, you get into very specific kind of stuff. But the other thing I would like about we should also say DM25 stands for Democracy in Europe Movement 25. 25 refers to 2025, the year that they want to start a constitution for Europe. That's where that kind of comes from, although that goal might seem a little lofty now. For sure. The interesting thing about that is, like, they definitely have this prescription of, like, Europe needs to be more democratic. It needs to represent more of a republic to, like, actually make it a decent system. But at the same time, they are Euro critical. They're not the more Europe kind of wing of European unification. Because, like, I guess the difference between that would be, like, the more Europe wing is like, everything that we have now is good. We just don't have enough of it.
Exactly.
Like
the Macron level of.
Yes. Yeah. Pan-European movement is quite like that as well. The thing I like about European Spring and DM25 is they are very policy prescriptive.
Yeah.
They actually, like, have very clearly written out plans and also have, like, discussed at length how they would implement that. They
just introduced a Green New Deal too the other day, a couple months ago or whatever. I don't know.
They basically had that plan for a very, very long time, but they've just hijacked the American branding. Yeah. And taken on that moment because, they've always had this idea to turn Europe way more green. They have, like, a basic income plan as well, which works a little differently. They want to do, like, they want to have a Europe-wide sovereign welfare fund like Norway has.
Yeah.
And rather than getting a basic income, every citizen gets what they call a universal citizen's dividend. So you get like the profits of that, dished out to you. Anyway, other things that I genuinely like about like their program would be, and probably the only ones I see talking about this is they feel like this is definitely that has to be dealt with at a European level, is ending tax havens. Because there's a fuck ton of tax havens within Europe.
Ireland.
Okay. All right, hang on. Correction point out here. I hate that Ireland gets so much flack when the Isle of Man is right fucking there beside us. Ireland has a low tax rate.
Have you ever seen that? There's a chart. It's a really kind of stupid looking chart, but it has all the European countries as in a circle.
Yeah.
And then money that flows in and out of them. So one is money flowing out, and the other one's money flowing in. Yeah. And if you let's see like Luxembourg, it's like no money flowing out of it, and then Luxembourg money flowing into it is just like a massive red strip.
So like there's that. There is like this like sweetheart deal that a lot of European countries are doing, even though like their actual stated tax rate is like a nice corporate tax rate, but then they just come along and be like, hey, I'm Apple. Oh, hey, Apple, fucking slide into my DMs or whatever the fuck the kids are saying. Because, like, there's that problem. But then there is just, like, more explicit tax havens, like, basically all the microstates in Europe. Isle of Man.
Luxembourg.
Yeah, okay. But, like, even the smaller ones. Monaco.
Andorra.
Yeah, Andorra is another one. San Marino. All of them. Actually, just fucking all of them. Then... And also, Ciarán's fucking pet fucking political project, which they have on their books, is immigrant suffrage. The idea that if you're an immigrant in the country, you have the right to vote.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, like again, like I said, the only problem I really have with DM25 is
let's bitch about them now.
Yeah, the only time that my only real qualm is, of course, like given I like Yanis Varoufakis on his handling with like the EU thing that he did with Greece and whatnot.
It's like the only pop political scientists actually talk about the EU as well.
Yeah.
At a very intimate level.
Like, I really like him with that, and I really liked then the sense of, okay, like, I think we all could have seen, like, the demolition of Syriza from, like, the very beginning when they got elected, because they became, like, PASOK.
Yeah.
And there is a reason why certain left-wing parties did not join them, like the Communist Party, given the Communist Party of Greece is fucking crazy sometimes with their, like, horribly homophobic things. But they could have, I mean, I know that for a fact that they saw that happening, and given, I think that everyone forgets that Tsipras was a member of the Communist Party like 10 years ago or so.
A lot of his political history is super legit.
Which a
lot of people forget.
So it is a factor that then, like, I mean, wanting to look at Syriza with like rose-colored glasses when they came about was just kind of like not going to happen, because I think just how the history of how that country works. Again, what we were saying, if you're a socialist government in a smaller European country with very insignificant economic power or an economic crisis, you're not going to do shit. Like, you're going to have to appease a lot of fucking libs. And, you know, I think that Varoufakis kind of accepting that he lost that battle, stepping down from his position as a finance minister, knowing that then, like, this is the goal that I wanted, and I, didn't get that, so I'm out. Cool. Like, trying to stand up against Germany, kind of failing, but at least brought the discussion onto the table, and that he's been continuously doing that. Given he has a massive fucking ego.
Yes.
It is really like I do get it, like, a sense that. Yeah, okay, he's a cool academic and he's this and that, but, like, damn, son.
Yeah.
he.
So there's, like, ways that this has gotten in the way of, like, DM25 would be, a classic example is he had an interview with a Brussels Bubble article called, a publication called Eurafrika, and he had an interview in that where he basically stated that DM25 won't work with the United European Left, Nordic Green Left, like the left-wing group within the European context. He's like stated in the past criticisms of Mélenchon, of Die Linke, and namely, like, I think he falls into a lot of liberal views of these parties as well, because Mélenchon is not as anti-EU as like a lot of liberal press has like depicted him as.
is not that.
No, Die Linke is not as well, but he views Die Linke as Wagenknecht and only her, basically. Yeah. So like he has this criticism of Wagenknecht, which I can agree with, but then he extends to the whole party. But
she stepped down, actually.
She has now, yeah. But there hasn't been an updated comment. But like this before she,
which is the best thing that has happened to that party in a while. Like,
yeah,
to be fair, like that was always the biggest pet peeve of mine, is that like Die Linke, at least in Germany, was always kind of the party that then like I when it comes to local elections that I can vote in, they would be like, they're kind of just like the go-to one of like, all right, like that's a party that I at least can see get into government, and that could actually then like I'm not going to vote for a small left-wing party. That's a fucking waste of my time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's the hardest thing to kind of like justify. That was always around with like, especially during the 2014 to 2015, just like the complete racist bullshit coming out of Sarah Wagenknecht's mouth.
It's
very like I'm surprised that she like kind of stayed along in that party as long as she did, with how the rest of the party being not nearly as problematic as her.
Yeah, right. So that is like super interesting. Like, but when he made these comments, a lot of the local chapters of DiEM25, like including the Berlin one, were like, "Fuck," because they kind of had plans to actually work with the left wing groups. Like,
I think that they will. I think just
they will. Like,
his ego is just so fucking
like
big.
100% disclosure. Like, I pay attention to like the local organizing of Die Linke here in Berlin, and they already have on their books after the European election of like reaching out and working with DiEM25. Yeah. Like, so a lot of these places are willing, and yeah, I think by getting into the form of electoralism that they did get into, where they kind of like signed up to particular parties, meant that they were then de facto in opposition to the rest of them. Rather than, I think what would have been better is if DiEM25 just became kind of like the DSA in the States, where they like, it's down to the local chapters to be like, find the candidates you think are like subscribing to our ideas and promote them. You can do this by candidate, you can do it by party, because that makes more sense in a European context, but like, yeah, make it a bit more loose rather than a formal coalition, because I
think at first they kind of have to make it more formal in order to get like the ball rolling. I do think though, with if they do stick with their guns about like democratization and decentralization, that could potentially be something on the on the books. And they have, I guess also to mention too, they've also created like an international coalition as well, which is pretty interesting. That like, what is it called? Like the Progressive International. It has a dumb ass name, at least in my opinion.
Oh, that actually kind of leads to another point, but continue talking.
But yeah,
about
so they've like Bernie Sanders has signed onto it, and like some other, like I think Slavoj Žižek has also signed onto it. So just like kind of like the biggest names that you can think of in like the
I would like
left.
I would like to see more like left-wing movements in various other countries sign up. Like, I would love if they could get momentum in the UK. That's the other thing. Like, there's
another thing I also like, to be fair, I also hate seeing them when these movements pop up, and given and this is me just kind of bitch about a topic that doesn't really need to really be addressed right now, but because you were talking about Turkey and how Turkey's never mentioned in the European Union thing, or even mentioned in like the European
context, like pan-European context.
And I really wish that then when it comes to the sense of like creating then like a socialist, alternative thing, they're a party in the U.S., aren't they?
Socialist alternative,
okay. Creating then like a socialist ideal for Europe, and creating then like if it is an international movement, then also bringing into like, given Turkey's not an EU member, but creating like things that the communists of yesteryear did very well, especially I mean looking at the history of Greece and Turkey, is that the communists in both of those countries were like ride or die for each other, and I don't see that then outside of a Western worldview with a lot of
100%. I would love, because it's also for the purposes of people who like just want to be more active in these spaces or start a podcast. It's just a great set of like at least links to fucking learn about other things out there. Because like in Europe, like the whole of fucking West Asia, Africa, there's like a whole bunch of shit there, but like I think there's still this very I don't want to say liberal, because I don't think liberals often.
It's just Eurocentric.
Yeah, there's a like Eurocentrism. There's like this Eurocentric view that feels like the complexity of European politics that surely doesn't carry over to these countries.
Yeah.
Those are simple countries with strongman dictators or whatever the fuck.
Yeah, and I mean, like, even like to be fair, like, given one of the really tiny parties in Germany, who will never be elected for anything, like the Marxist-Leninist Party here, have a massive network of other organizations that they work for in like that they work with in like, you know, Turkey and Syria, and in Lebanon and in all these countries that are kind of like ignored by other, you know. Eurocentric leftism.
Yeah.
Given the MLPD is a weird party, but at least one of the things I really do respect about them is that they do have that interconnectivity that a lot of other left-wing movements just like. They helped build like hospitals in like Kurdistan and shit like that, which is fucking cool.
That is pretty cool. The next kind of point that you almost touched on there is a kind of thing that should raise a little bit of a red flag when it comes to DiEM25 and Progressive International is a part of that as well, but the unwillingness to call themselves socialist.
Yeah.
That is like a...
Well, Varoufakis has said himself that he doesn't want to use that word because of the 20th century, which, I mean, I can understand if you're wanting to like market that to Americans.
Yeah. But like, I feel like the DSA kind of did well in terms of like media moment within the States because it was the right, well, Bernie, but it was also the right moment to reintroduce that term into the lexicon. Like Bernie did that for sure. But then this idea that like they were able to push the Overton window, they got this shock value, and then once the shock faded away, you got a bunch of people who were like, "Oh, what is this?"
Yeah.
Whereas I understand like Varoufakis' perspective because Varoufakis comes from like really common in the south of Europe that you're like a center-left party that turned neoliberal was just called the Socialist
Party. The same thing in like all of Europe for the most part.
For a lot of Europe, yeah. I thought it was in Germany, but then I found out the S in SPD stands for social and not socialists.
Oh, yeah, true.
Yeah. But like literally like Hollande's party in France was just Les Socialists. Yeah. So there's like a poison. He's like, I think he's right to a certain extent that there is a poisoning.
To be fair, the SPD back in like the 20s were radical as fuck.
Yeah, they were.
Like they were far better than any like Marxist or left-wing parties today. Yeah. Maybe not in the 20s, but before the 20s. Like Rosa Luxemburg was a member of the SPD. Like,
exactly.
Let's not forget. Marx and Engels were also members. Well, no, Engels was a member of the SPD. Marx, I don't think was.
I think the only other criticism I would have of DiEM25, I think this is my last one, would be that they really kind of sat on their ass for way too long. They started in like
4 years ago, I think, or something.
Yeah, like 2015. Yeah.
It was 2015 because it was a kickoff that 10 years later was going to be the 20 like was
we'll do this in 10 years. Yeah,
and the kickoff was actually here at in Rosa-Luxemburg-Platz. Is that which theater is that? Volksbühne.
Yeah.
It was there, and it was like the big kickoff party. And the reason that they did it in Berlin was, I don't know, internationalism or something. I don't know.
Yeah, well, like because it was literally because it was something where like Marx did something there, or Lenin did, or some figure in socialist tradition did something big there. Or in that area, so that's why they did it there. Like they are socialists, they are like
yeah. They just don't want to.
They just don't
which to give them credit to not credit, but to at least have a point of understanding. I don't care what you label yourself, as long as then like your policies are then socialist. You know, it's not a debate I want to fucking have with the DiEM25. Like, oh, why don't you call yourself socialist? Because I mean, for half of Europe, they were under the USSR, and they may, and I can understand then within a country like that, if you do then label yourself a socialist, you're gonna get just dipshit, fash idiots, coming at you. Not saying that then that you still aren't socialist, and not saying that then that being socialist is a bad thing, but there has to be a way to then like alleviate that. Barrier of that for some countries and for some people. That's not the easiest thing to go in and be like, to be fair, like I think there are like Albania, again, this comes into the what is a socialist thing, but I think like the ruling party in Albania is a socialist party.
Yes, it is, yeah.
But they're neoliberal socialists.
Yeah.
So
yeah, so like I said, that's a real problem in like just everywhere in the south of Europe. But yeah, it's super interesting. But like, before I moved to Berlin, I genuinely thought that movement was dead. Like DiEM25, I
thought it was dead up until like a couple of months ago.
Yeah,
when I heard an interview with Yanis Varoufakis.
Yeah,
and he was promoting it. So I'm like, okay, he's still around doing his thing. That's cool.
Yeah.
So Yeah.
Good luck to them. I'm sure we'll do a full episode on them.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we'll have a few more European election
for sure.
one things because we got the fucking Euro wonk over here, which is you. So
that's the concept of a united Europe.
yeah. So next week, hopefully, we will be back with the whole gang.
The whole gang.
And I think actually, we may give some insight on the Turkish elections when they finish, if the AKP doesn't,
the nationwide referendum that asked the simple question:
why didn't we win?
Is Turkey Europe?
Yeah. No. So next week everyone will be back from vacation, or the weather will be bad, and then Yulia won't want to be outside. So yeah. So see y'all then.
Bye.